arms fall off, till your abs get hard, and your moral of the story.
What is happening, guys? It's Nick Bolet from Bolet Brigade. You guys asked for it, you seem to like it, so I'm back with another episode of Research Review. Today we're going to be talking about a highly talked about topic, and that is blood flow restriction training. So before we get into the experiment that I'm going to be talking about today, the first thing I want to do is talk about the background of what is blood flow restriction training, also known as occlusion training. Talk about why it could possibly be beneficial, why is it even in existence in the first place, and then we'll get into the experiment. So blood flow restriction training is pretty straightforward. It's simply just training, doing some sort of a movement, and you are going to have some sort of a band or some sort of thing that is restricting the blood flow to the active tissue, which in this case is your muscles. So a common misconception right off the bat about blood flow restriction training is most people think that the purpose is to restrict blood flow to your muscles. While that does happen, it's actually more to restrict blood flow from your muscles back to the heart. So it is essentially lowering venous return. So venous return simply refers to the amount of blood in the venous system or in your veins. And this is just the amount of blood that's going from the active tissues, which of course in this case are your muscles, and it's going back to the heart. So this process allows blood to go to the heart pumps the blood to the lungs, and it is then reoxygenated. Our muscles and any of the tissues in our body really like to do things with oxygen most of the time. You can produce a lot more ATP when oxygen is present. So yeah, typically we want our active tissues to have oxygen. So, the heart then will pump oxygenated blood back to your active tissues, and it's just a cycle of oxygenated blood to your muscles or your active tissues, and then this deoxygenated blood going back to the heart, back to the lungs, and it's just a cycle. So why would we want to stop venous return? Well, what happens when oxygenated blood is used by the muscles, you get a lot of buildup of metabolites, namely carbon dioxide and lactic acid. And lactic acid dissociates to lactate and hydrogen ions. And hydrogen ions are actually what causes not only muscular fatigue, but also they can cause a lot of pain. So hydrogen ions are actually the things that build up on the end of your sensory neurons and actually cause you pain. It's not actually the lactic acid that causes the pain. So why would we want a buildup of that in our muscles? Well, I think by now it is well established that volume and progressive overload is the biggest thing to induce hypertrophy. And that's absolutely 100% true. If you can do more weight for more reps and more sets, you will build muscle over time. However, muscular damage is also another factor that can induce muscular hypertrophy. And muscular damage can come from building up these metabolites. So hydrogen ions, carbon dioxide, and other metabolites can cause muscular damage. So the more muscular damage that we can cause, as long as we're not going past a certain threshold that we can't recover from, the more muscular hypertrophy that we can induce. So the reason that blood flow restriction training came about is that it can cause muscular damage without taxing our central nervous system. So typically when we're focused on progressive overload, we're using a lot of central nervous system activity. However, with blood flow restriction training, we're getting the muscular damage without necessarily taxing our central nervous system. So now we're going to look into, is this theory actually correct? And we're going to compare a few different blood flow restriction training protocols and just a more conventional progressive overload training protocol in terms of strength and hypertrophy. Okay, so the name of this study is Effects of Exercise Intensity and Occlusion Pressure After 12 Weeks of Resistance Training with Blood Flow Restriction. So that's a mouthful. Basically, we're going to take 12 weeks. We're going to tell people to follow this certain blood flow restriction protocol or be part of the control group where you're doing more of a conventional just lifting straight weight. And then we're going to see if they get stronger and if they grow more muscle, and we're going to compare them. So there was 4 different blood flow restriction protocols, and it was basically there was 2 different intensities. So you were either lifting at 20% of your 1 rep max or 40% of your 1 rep max. And then there was 2 different occlusion pressures, which essentially means there was 2 different amounts of venous return restriction. Basically, it just comes down to one group was lifting with a looser band around their biceps. Actually, in this study, it was around their quadriceps. So they would have a looser band around their quadriceps versus a tighter band around their quadriceps. So it was either 40% occlusion or 80% occlusion, 80% being a tighter band. And then there was a control group that was just lifting 80% of their 1 rep max for straight weight, and all the groups were controlled for volume. So what were the results of the study? Well, the results were that the low intensity, high occlusion group was the best in terms of strength gains and hypertrophy gains among the blood flow restriction groups. When we compared the straight weight group and the 80-20 group or 20-80 group, 20% intensity, 80% occlusion, we saw very similar gains in muscular hypertrophy. In fact, even possibly better hypertrophy gains in the 20-80 group or the blood flow restriction group. However, there was significantly better strength gains seen in the straight weight group. So what does that mean? It means that lifting straight weights is probably going to be better for muscular strength. And in terms of muscular hypertrophy, straight weight and blood flow restriction are about the same. Okay, so now what I want to do is interpret what that means a little bit and how you could possibly apply it to your training. So first off, what does that mean? So most of the people who watch my channel are powerlifters. So you're constantly taxing your central nervous system by doing heavy squats, benches, and deadlifts. So blood flow restriction is going to get you the same amount of hypertrophy with less tax on your central nervous system than, say, lifting straight weight goes. So it might get you more bang for your buck if you're a power lifter, or if you're somebody who just likes to lift heavy or do compound movements with progressive overload. In the long run, if you are taxing your central nervous system because you're working on progressive overload with bicep curls, then maybe that's not the best idea for you. Maybe you can get the same bang for your buck, so you're getting the same amount of hypertrophy doing something that won't tax your central nervous system, like blood flow restriction training. So that is totally my opinion. However, it makes sense going off of this article. I'm sorry if I keep looking this way. I have the article here so I can reference it. So how would I actually go about doing this? So the article suggests that a stronger occlusion pressure and a lower intensity induces the most muscular hypertrophy. So what we want to do is we want to get a really tight band and a really light weight. So I have this band right here, which I just found in the gym in my apartment building. And what I do is I just double loop it like so. So it's pretty tight. This is probably about 3 inches in diameter. And then I just roll it up my arm right until the point where my bicep intersects with my shoulder joint. Yeah, so I just roll this up to the top or the origin of the muscle that I'm trying to work. So if it was the quadriceps, you would roll it up all the way to your hip. So wherever the origin is of the muscle that you're trying to train is where you would roll the band to. And so you want something that's really tight. You want to reduce venous return as much as possible. And then as far as the weight goes, to pick a load, I don't really think it would be beneficial to go into the gym and find your 1 rep max on a cable curl. However, if you really want to be precise about it, you could. What I would suggest is picking a weight that you think you could legitimately do 30 to 40 unbroken repetitions with, and then do about sets of about 20 to 30. So you're not necessarily going to absolute failure, but you are working with a very light load with very high restriction. And I think that was probably the best way to try and going about implementing this if you do want to work it into your training. And that's personally what I've been doing recently. I can't say whether or not my arms are growing because my arms are still pretty damn small, but at least what I'm doing is at least sort of scientifically backed. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.